I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Creek Devil. Tom, would you like to introduce our guest today?
Absolutely. We've got a special guest today. This is Alan, and I'm going to have Alan give his bio because he can do a much better job than I can. But before we go, I just want to say, if you like the show, let us know. Click the like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And if you want to support the show, you can do so. We've got a link to Patreon in the description. And one other thing is I've had a couple people say they've had troubles finding us. So I just want to say that the show, the YouTube channel is William Jevning's YouTube channel. So it's, even though the show is Creek Devil, if you Google William Jevning YouTube, you'll find us right away. And obviously, if you're listening to this, you've already found us. But pass that on to friends that might be interested. So at this point, I'm going to hand this off to Alan. Alan, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and your latest, you and I talked about an adventure you had in Colorado.
Yeah, so my name's Alan McGargle, and I've been a paranormal investigator for a long time, a couple decades. I've been a Bigfoot researcher for probably the last 14 years or so. I spent some time in the BFRO, came up through the old ranks in Ohio there. And then I've been running a camp out weekend called Bigfoot Adventure Weekends for about 11 years now. And then in 2015, I started making documentary films, and I produced several different films. I worked on the Minerva Monster Project with Small Town Monsters. I produced and directed the film The Back 80. I've also worked on a film called The Ghosts and Ghost Towns, Haunting the Wild West. Bigfoot Alien Connection Revealed, and just recently completed the Alien Contact in the Rockies. And lots more stuff coming out. So that's what I do. I keep really busy.
Well, it sounds like it's not only busy, but a lot of fun. So tell us a little bit about the latest adventure, the one you had. You called it the Meat Pit.
Yes.
And I love the name. So tell us about it. What's going on there?
So one of the things that happen along the way, well, it happens a lot actually, is, I meet people, and sometimes those people pique my interest. In this case, I met a gentleman in Estes Park, Colorado, when I moved out to Colorado about 4 years ago. His name's Kenny Collins, and he's been researching and doing Bigfoot investigating for a long time, 30 plus years. And he has a whole trove of information about that. And he introduced me to some other people, and it turns out there's an area that they've all had some very interesting experiences in. They call it the Flat Tops. It's not exactly the Flat Tops Park, but it's in that area of sort of a northern Colorado, eastern or western slope of the Rocky Mountains. And they have an area down there that they call the Meat Pit. It got dubbed that because they've all had Bigfoot experiences down in this area, and they began leaving plates of meat out. And that seemed to draw on the Bigfoot, and they would have interactions with Bigfoot.
I got two questions before you get too much further.
Sure.
So it sounds like they're sure that the Bigfoot came in and ate the meat. What kind of meat? What was it? Ham, bacon, beef?
I don't think there's any rules for the Meat Pit. I know when we were there, it was pretty much, what do you got? I think they've done anything from hot dogs to putting steak out there. So I think there's no rules.
Okay, very good. Interesting.
So in this particular weekend, we were camping about a half a mile away or so, and then we hiked down into the Meat Pit our first night. And the first thing I noticed was there was a camping area down there. And I said to Kenny, I said, why aren't we camping here? And he's like, oh, no, nobody camps down here. This is where the action happens. It's it's too intense to camp down here. I was like, well, tomorrow night, guess where we're camping? I mean, that's where we need to be. So that's what we did. We spent the first night down there, checking things out. We didn't have too much happen. And then during the day, the next day, we broke down some of our camp and we set up down in this meat pit area. And we're sort of like right on the top of it. So if you hike past our campsite, you actually go down into this bowl. It's like sort of not really a ravine. It's not deep, but it's a little valley. So we baited the meat pit that night, and we retreated back to our camping area, and we had a fire going, and we had a couple things happen around the fire. Nothing too interesting, though it was dramatic in some ways. We weren't expecting a lot, and the little things that did happen startled us. But we finally got to the point where we were ready to just pack it in. Let's go back to the tents and turn in for the night and let Bigfoot come to us. And pretty much as soon as we got up from our camping chairs and started walking towards the tents, we heard this series of screams. I wouldn't say I've never heard them before, but it's a distinct sound. And in this time, it sounded like maybe, 3 to 5 individual somethings making a horrendous screaming noise, not too far from our camp, but in the opposite direction from the meat pit. So we kind of talked about it a little bit. It went on long enough that I was able to get the camera turned on and kind of catch the tail end of it. So I was able to capture some of the audio. But we ultimately decided to stick with our plan and let's just go to the tents and let them come to us. So basically we had a restless night, but nothing really happened that we were aware of. In the morning, I got up and Kenny and I went down to check the meat plate. It had been untouched, which I wasn't totally surprised because I think they were there and they were in the opposite direction that night. As a side note, before we got there, Kenny was there probably maybe 4 or 5 days before we got there, and he actually found a footprint near, I guess, where I would go into the woods if I was to guess where those noises came from. So there was a footprint found there just a few days before, which he cast and took some measurements of. So it seemed like they were in a different area that weekend. But when we were coming back from the meat pit, I noticed, I think Kenny actually did, that there was a disturbance in the back window of my car. So we took a good close look at it, and it looked like a giant handprint. And what was unusual about it, a lot of things were unusual about it actually, was that it was in the center of the back window. So not a place that you would push on to close the door. So it really stuck out, and it was very, pronounced in the dust that was on the window, because the road down to the meat pit is very rough, 4x4 kind of road, and it was dry and very dusty. So the car was covered in this, film of dust. And there was a lot of unique things about the handprint. One was that the fingers were really long, but they seemed to be very thin. And some of the, I guess the alignment of the fingers didn't quite match what a human handprint would look like. It didn't have like the splay, I guess is what you would call it. So the fingers seemed to come off of the palm in straight lines, not at an angle. So it was just a few weird things about it. So I got the car home and we did some measurements and filming. I checked it with a black light and I took some DNA swabs of it, and I tried to lift it off with some tape, but the powder wouldn't really stick to it. There wasn't enough oil on it. So the print basically got ruined while we tried to do that, but there wasn't much more we could do. And at some point it was going to rain, or, that it was going to wash off the car. So we did all we could do, and that's sort of where we are right now.
Well, I'm looking at it right now. I think you posted it on Facebook. Will sent me a copy of it.
Yeah.
And did you get I had a sort of a similar one, handprint that was on the middle panel of the rear door of my truck. And did you get that, the one that I sent you?
Yeah, that one was very interesting too. It was definitely a muddier situation. That the handprint was basically in mud, but very interesting as well. Very big.
Yeah. Well, actually, it was a hot and dusty handprint. But the thing that was interesting was I actually washed my truck at least 2 times. Ran it through the car wash, a couple times. And I think it took 3 times before it finally went away. There must have been some grease or something on that handprint. But when you described yours with the long fingers, and this one is sort of the same thing, but I don't know. Why do they do that? Maybe they're curious. Who knows?
Well, I mean, I think sort of a calling card just to let us know that they came by and paid us a little visit. I think for me, it was some validation that we were in the right place and we had something happen. I mean, that's kind of how I took it.
I thought it was more like you're next.
No, I definitely didn't take it like that.
Okay, so now this happened at the same place at the meat pit, right? Same general area.
Yeah, this would have been at the top of the hill, right at what they call the meat pit area. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, and did you have any other, besides the screams and the handprint, any other activity or evidence? I think you mentioned a footprint at one point.
Yep. Yeah, the only other thing that happened before we got there, and at the campsite a half mile away, I think maybe 2 nights before we got there, there was a really intense thunderstorm, and my friend Kenny was hiding out in his tent, and during some of the lightning, he could see a shadow of a figure that he said it looked like it came up to his tent and checked him out and then walked off. What was interesting, after he told us that, we were kind of looking around, and you could see where something had come through the tall grass field behind his tent and came up to his tent. And that was, fresh matted down grass coming through that area. So kind of a little evidence to back up his potential sighting through the tent wall.
Absolutely. Well, and again, when you think about the evidence of the creatures, number one, you need to kind of be in tune for what you're looking for, and also just kind of understand that they're out there, but they're hiding in plain sight. So if you know what you're looking for, it becomes easier to spot the evidence and potentially spot the creature as well. So what were some of the other encounters that you've had excuse me, with in your research over the years for Bigfoot?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's Bigfoot alien connection reveal. We were going across the United States to different places, and I've had a lot of experiences there. So, I mean, I've got a whole sort of treasure trove of things that have happened now. Some personal contact experiences. I've not had what you would call a Class A sighting. It just doesn't seem to work that way for me, but I'm fine with that. I don't necessarily need that. I've had interactions, rock throwings, and things like that. I'm not sure is there a particular thread that's more appealing to you than another.
No, tell us a little bit about the rock throwing, because that always interests me, because it's something with hands. It always boils down to it's either a person or these things. There's really not much in between. So
right.
Fill us in on the, how did you get to that point and what happened and what's going on with the rock throwing?
I've got a few of those, but I'll go with the most dramatic one and what I consider the best one. It was probably about maybe 4 years ago. At Bigfoot Adventure Weekends in Ohio, we were at Salt Fork State Park, which is a well-known Bigfoot area. The Ohio people know that well. And I had a small group of people, maybe 5 or 6. There was a couple moms and a bunch of kids, some of them pretty young. And it had been raining that day, so we decided to sort of stick to the roads and not really go off into the woods too much. It was pretty muddy. So we were walking along. We'd parked down at this dead-end area, and then we walked back up the road. And it's a pretty remote road in the wildlife area of Salt Fork. And we were the only ones out there. And as we were sort of walking up this gravel dirt road, I was probably in the middle of the group. Someone in front said that they had heard a rock come through the trees and land next to them. So we sort of paused, and then someone else in the group said, I just saw, red eyes. They just flashed and then they ducked down. Now we had red headlamps on, so I would call this eye shine, not necessarily self-illuminating, but it was eye shine nonetheless. And then I was able to sort of get up to where things were happening and get my bearings on where we were and what was going on. And we all basically witnessed rock after rock after rock, a few seconds to a minute or two apart, over and over and over again for about 45 minutes. But the thing that was interesting was no one ever got hit. It was always sort of thrown at our feet. You could hear it come through the trees and then land on the gravel. We could see the tree branches move once in a while, so we knew where it was. And then some people that were, I guess, a little closer to being down the road a little further, but they were still very close to me. Everyone was sort of freaked out. The kids were crying at this point. So I radioed another group that we had out there in the area. They were a couple miles away. I told them to come over and help me. I need to get the kids out of here. They're panicking, but we're having a Bigfoot encounter, and I'm not leaving. I don't care if kids are crying or not. So eventually someone from the group said, I'm hearing something down the road a little bit further. And I can see, it's pitch black, but I can see something darker dart across the road. So I kind of started focusing on that. And once in a while you could hear something run across the road and you could almost sort of see it, but it was too dark. It was in the shadow of the trees. Meanwhile, the rocks are still being thrown. So in my head, I came up with this theory that we may have stumbled upon a female Sasquatch with a baby. And I think we kind of spooked them, so they just kind of hunkered down behind the trees, and we kind of had them pinned down accidentally. And my theory is that Papa, the bigger one, was down the road a little bit trying to get our attention and trying to draw us away. And at one point, we got the sense that it ran across the road and was heading behind us. So I got a little concerned for our group. I'm not overly, but I decided to walk back behind our group into the wood line a little bit to sort of cut it off, just to make my people feel better. And that seemed to work. I could hear something move, and it backed up, and it went back across the road again. So
there's similarities with that. We've had at least two people on the show in the past, within the last year and a half, from Salt Fork, who've had that type of experience with the rock throwing and landing at their feet. So it's interesting. You're like the third guy who's mentioned that. And
well, it's happened to me probably 3 or 4 times there, because I've spent a good decade investigating that park, so I've been there a lot.
So tell us, for people that don't know anything about Salt Fork, tell us a little bit about it. Is it like a enclosed wooded area, and do
Sure.
you have any civilization around, or is it kind of wilderness? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so what's interesting about Ohio is basically the north part of Ohio and the west part of Ohio has all been sort of cleared by glaciers back in the day. But the southeastern part of Ohio is still very much not. So it's a lot more hilly and ravines and old growth forest and things like that. So Ohio is known for that southern, they had called it the Bigfoot Triangle. It's Cambridge, Ohio, over to Coshocton, and down through that area. They call it the Bigfoot Triangle because it's very dense woods. It's very remote areas. There's little towns around and things, but there's no big cities. The other interesting thing about Ohio is, there's not a lot of, thousands of acres of undeveloped wilderness. So there's a lot of, roads that cut through, and a lot of the Bigfoot sightings in Ohio are road crossings. But the nice thing is that there's only so many places these creatures could hide. So it does make it, convenient for people like us that like to go in the woods and find them. There's only so much place they can be. We're out here in Colorado. We've got, millions of places for them to be. It's a lot more difficult to find them. But Salt Fork's interesting because it's the largest state park in Ohio. And basically the western part of the park is somewhat developed. There's a couple different campgrounds, a primitive campground, a larger campground with electricity and everything. And there's a lodge there where you can book cabins and rooms. And There's civilization to some degree. But then the western side of Salt Fork is the wildlife area, and it's probably just as big, if not a little bigger, than the developed part. So when you go there, most of the people they're at the little beach on the lake, or they're staying at the lodge in the cabins, and they don't usually go over into the wildlife area. So when you go there, especially in some of the off season, you kind of have the place to yourself, except for other Bigfoot people. So it's kind of the ideal place, I think. There's people, which Bigfoot like. They're very curious. They like to interact with people. And there's, food sources and water sources and places to hide. And there's no doubt in my mind that they're there on the regular.
We have a lot of reports from Ohio. And like I said, specifically 3 of them from Salt Fork. And I'm just going to ask you a question. There was the DNR, Ohio. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the Ohio DNR did a 4-part series right in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
About Bigfoot, and I was kind of surprised. This came from state government, coming right out and talking about it.
It was from naturalist John Hickenbottom, who I worked with a little bit at the park when I was there. Okay,
and what was his thoughts? What's his perspective on the existence of Bigfoot?
John's interesting because when I first met him, he was entertained by it, and that was about as good as you would get from him. He would not admit anything. He went on and did some other things at some different parks, and I started working with the new naturalist. Her name was Cindy Koss, and we developed a Bigfoot program at the park there. Me and my business partner Jesse Morgan, and we started doing Bigfoot night hikes for the campground. And we would have 200-300 people show up, and we'd split them up into groups and take them on Bigfoot hikes. And it was a big deal for the park. It brought in lots of people. And then Cindy moved on, and John came back, and it was about that time that I moved to Colorado. So everything that we were doing kind of ended. But he worked with my buddy Jesse for about a year after I was gone, and kind of got established with the Bigfoot stuff. And then as we pulled out, John took over. So he's really gotten into it. He's been speaking at some conferences and stuff, and we've gone back a few times to do our camp out weekend, and he's come by as a guest and talked to our attendees and attended some of our hikes and stuff. So he's into it, and he's been working with the Ohio BFRO, and I don't know if he's official capacity on anything, but he's a Bigfoot believer, that's for sure.
Oh, that's interesting. So how do you compare, you talked about a little bit of the differences between the Bigfoot in Ohio and Colorado, but how do you compare the two, and what would your preference be as far as doing the research? Would you prefer Ohio or Colorado, or?
Ohio's been good to me because I've had a lot of experiences. Colorado's is a lot more scenic. So when you're not finding Bigfoot, it's a lot more fun to be out hiking around the mountains and things. And the people here are a lot different. They're a lot more open to some of the non-primate theories about Bigfoot. It's definitely dragged me away from that. A lot of my experiences I've had since I left Ohio have not been typical primate experiences, but more communication type things and more paranormal in nature, I guess, to put it a different way. So I've enjoyed exploring that other side of it. That was something that I really didn't try to do before, and it's really opened my mind to the possibility of all these things. And for me, it was really convenient because I've always been fascinated with UFOs and ghosts and paranormal and Bigfoot, and I just sort of put it all together now and just go looking for whatever I find. So it's really fit me very well, I think.
What so in Colorado, what would you say are the number of encounters that you've had? You've been there for what, 4 years?
Yeah, about 4 years.
Okay. And in the 4 years, I'm assuming you've done quite a bit of research. How many really significant encounters do you think you've run into?
Um, probably not a ton because actually I haven't really done as much here as I did in Ohio because I've been working with my father-in-law, Ron Meyer, who owns Center Communications, and we've been producing some content like this together for the last few years, and it's really put me on the road. So a lot of my experiences the last few years have been in other places. I've had some here in Colorado. We've definitely done some work here, but a lot of what I've had done has happened in Arkansas and Oregon and Wisconsin and all these different places. It's actually been really cool. But yeah, I don't actually don't have a whole lot in Colorado just yet. But we did make a film called Alien Contact in the Rockies, where we really branched out and we tried to utilize some of the things that we were being told that we learned along the way. Like we started gifting for Bigfoot, where you leave a little something and you hope to get something back. And, we believe that we made some sort of contact, and I'm not sure if it was Bigfoot or what it was, but we basically had an animal mutilation left for us in our gifting area. And
okay, tell us a little bit about that. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so we'd worked this area it was a few years, really. It's actually my father-in-law's land. He's got 40 acres of raw wilderness above Loveland, Colorado, somewhat near Estes Park. So it's sort of more of a controlled environment for us. It's a gated area and very limited access. So we started some gifting and we got a little bit of responses, and we were sort of, more or less toying with it. We weren't going there a whole lot, a few times a year. It wasn't a concerted effort, like we weren't going up there every week. It's about an hour and a half drive or so to get up there. But we sort of thought to ourselves one day, let's go up there. It's been a little while. Let's see what's been happening. And when we went to our gifting spot, we found this deer, and it had no head. Removed. The legs were
I think we lost
clean
you
cut or broken clean.
I apologize.
That's
I
okay.
think we lost you for about 30 seconds there. I just heard the part about no head and then it cut off. So
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about, so what happened?
So where did we leave off?
You said you found a deer. It had no
Okay.
head, and then we kind of lost you. So what did you find? You found a deer with no head, and
Okay.
what else?
Yes, so we found a deer it had no head. It was the hindquarters looked like they'd been cut open, and some organs were most likely removed. And we found that the legs were either clean broken or cut. And then I think the two things that were the strangest was there was no blood anywhere, so whatever had happened to it hadn't happened there. And there was no signs of how it got there. There were no drag marks, or the shrubs around it weren't disturbed in any way. So it was almost like it sort of was dropped there from somewhere. So it was really peculiar, and we did a whole investigation and ended up making a film about that whole experience.
So when you say it was cut and the legs were cut, could you tell if there was tool use, or do you think it may have been dismembered without the use of tools?
So there was no evidence of tools. The legs, especially the bones, were broken clean. They weren't sawed, and the hindquarters they weren't chewed. It was clean cut. Whether there was a tool used to cut the flesh, I couldn't say, but I don't think so. There was just a lot about it that was
Yeah.
really strange, and the fact that it was sort of right where we'd been doing our experiments was also not unnoticed. So we set up some trail cameras to sort of monitor that carcass, and we started recording some really strange anomalies where the camera would randomly, it would show a regular nighttime clip. There's a fox going by, and then it would, there's a bobcat, and then all of a sudden we get a clip where it's just all static. And as we're looking at these static clips, we got maybe 5 or 6 of them over a month or two period. We could start to see some movement in there. So we did some analysis and some video trickery where we sort of inverted the image and tried to pull it out. And you could see these little weird shaped creatures moving through the field of view of the camera. And we have no idea what it was, where they came from, but it was somehow related to what was happening.
And this was in Colorado, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, the head missing that's becoming pretty iconic now.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of that, both with deer, hogs, wild boar.
Yeah, the other thing to note too, this wasn't a prized deer. This was just a regular, run-of-the-mill deer. There was no reason that anyone would go to the effort to take the head of something that was just ordinary.
Right. No. That's. And if they did, I'm guessing the head's going to be cleanly cut. You can tell the difference between where a head has just been torn off.
Yeah.
And where a knife or a saw has been used.
The other interesting thing too, as we monitored this, none of the wildlife would actually go up to it and pick at it. You could see, like I said, there was a fox and a bobcat, and these things would kind of walk into the area and then just leave, and they wouldn't touch it. And then once we realized that, we went back with some measurement devices that I have for my paranormal kit, and we ended up determining that there was a dome shape of magnetic energy around this area, and we were able to measure that consistently over about 6 weeks until it continually faded until it was gone.
So you used, a magnetometer. What did you use to measure the magnetic field, and how did you find it?
So we used a tri-field meter and another type of magnetic meter that I had. We got the idea when we saw these clips, and the static seemed to have a dome shape to it as well in the video clips. So that's when we sort of got this idea that maybe some sort of energy, or we speculate maybe even some sort of portal or something was opened. So that's where we got the idea to go back and take these measurements, and it did confirm that I could step in and out of this field, and I could measure it above me in sort of this dome shape. And I think it was really telling that it sort of went away after a while. So my theory is some big event happened. The deer was part of it, and then the energy from that residual energy lasted for about 6 weeks, and then it's gone. And then after that energy was gone, the carcass got picked clean after that.
Oh, it was picked clean after it went away. Okay.
Yeah, eventually.
And the deer, I think we can safely say, was not a voluntary contributor to this experiment or whatever it was.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
Alan, this has been fascinating. I really appreciate it, and I think we're going to have you back on again at some point. Stay in touch with us. Keep us updated, and we'll do likewise. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. But any final questions for Will or myself?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, this has been very interesting, and I'm glad we had a chance to chat with you. And like I said, we're going to have you back on at some point.
Great.
So
yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. All right. So everybody stay tuned and for the next segment.
In Bigfoot history. Sister Lakes, Michigan, June 1964. True, June 1966, and other publications report a dozen people seeing a 9-foot, 500-pound thing that cries like a baby and makes the earth tremble when it walks. It looks like an ape, and its eyes shone in the dark. Several people said they'd seen such a creature earlier on occasion. Police found human-like footprints 6 inches wide across the ball and 4 inches across the heel. All sightings were at night except one by girls aged 12 and 13 who were frightened on a wooded road by something like a bear on its hind legs except for the face.
me about your experiences. What's been going on in that part of the country?
Well, most of them are not my experiences, because some of them are from one, I'll tell you a little bit about it. My dad was raised up in the City-Co Mountains of East Tennessee, and that's only about 35 miles from here where I live. And his family moved down, part of his family, his immediate family moved down to, I'll go ahead and say it, Sweetwater, back in the early 30s, but up until then, they lived up there in the mountains. I still got some people that are related to me up there. And where they lived is now Cherokee National Forest. So it is really, really wooded up there. I mean, there's mountains. They're not like huge mountains, but they're pretty, pretty, right there the foothills of the Smokies.
Sure.
And anyway, his experience, he told us about, he was real young. Yeah, I mean, not like 5 or anything, but not a grown man. And he'd went on up the mountain from where they lived to some more relatives. Like I said, we were all over the place up there, not relatives. And he said it started getting dark, and he was going back home, and said he started down the mountain and he heard this horrific scream, Yeah. And he said it sounded like a woman being killed. He thought, well, maybe that's a mountain lion or something, but he didn't know. And anyway, he just started walking a little faster down the mountain, and he said there was something walking out in the woods beside him, parallel.
Mm-hmm.
He said very heavy footsteps, and he said he tried to walk pretty fast, but he didn't run. He didn't know. He had no idea what it was. Of course, they'd never heard of that, I don't think, up there then. And he said it followed him all the way down just till he got right at home,
Wow.
He always talked about that. He said that was so strange, that he said had heavy footsteps. And it didn't make any other noise, but he could hear it. He said every time he stopped, it stopped. And he just thought, well, if it was a mountain lion or something, it would have come on after him, or a bear, or whatever. It wouldn't just walk down the mountain with him like that.
And typically another predatory animal, you wouldn't hear them if they were stalking you.
Yeah, well, he could hear that. He said it was just walking out in the woods. He couldn't see it, because it's a little further out in the woods than he was. And he said he heard it all the way down to, he got right at home, he said, and then he didn't hear it anymore, and then he ran the rest of the way.
Mm-hmm.
So that was his experience up there. And then I'm trying to think how old my mother was. She was probably a fairly young teenager, but her sister was about 3, maybe 4 years older than her. And they were raised in North Georgia. And they lived out on farms, all her life. They were, raised cotton and stuff like that. And she said that one night, back then, everybody didn't have a separate bedroom.
Oh, right.
Her and her sister slept in the same bed, And she said it was summer and the window was open. And she said she was asleep, and her sister poked her and said, "Hey, wake up, wake up." She said, "What?" And she realized her sister was buried down under the cover,
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "What are you doing down there?" She said, "Look and see if it's gone." She said, "What are you talking about?" She told this, and she said it was true. She said, her sister said, "Well, something," said, "it must have come through the window." She said, "I woke up and it was standing at the foot of our bed." She said it was
Wow.
really covered in hair, you know. And
It was
she said
actually in the
dark
house.
Colored. It was in the house.
Oh, good
She
Lord.
said it was dark colored, and said its eyes had a reddish tint to them, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And she said she saw it at the foot of the bed, and she said she was looking at it, you know, and it looked at her when it saw, you know, her looking at it. It started up toward the head of the bed. And she said, I went under the cover. And she said, I waited a while, and she said, I pulled the cover back down real slow and said it was back down there at the foot of the bed. She said, it looked at me again and started back up toward the head of the bed. And she said, I've been under the cover for about 30 minutes. She said, I'm about to smother to death under here. So look and see if it's gone. And Mama said she told her, oh, it was probably the old devil after you. You know, like that. Because she didn't see it, you know.
Right.
And then I think it was like a week or so later. Back then, everybody had an outhouse out in the country anyway. I mean, you know. And you knew, even though it'd be dark, and it was dark, Mama said, you know, no street lights or anything out there. But at night, you knew the path to the outhouse, you know, so people would go, you know.
Sure.
And she said they started out to the outhouse, her and her sister, and something just ran real hard, you know, fast toward them. That it ran right up to them, and it gave a, you know, and then it just left. She said they were terrified. She said that was like the most
Wow.
scared they'd ever been, you know. I mean, these are not as exciting as some of the things I've heard people tell on there, but still,
You know, it's
it
interesting
made
pieces
me
just
think,
the same.
you know, yeah. But, okay, now the siding.
Okay.
We live in a small town, and it's where we live back in the 60s. Was not even in what you'd call the city limits then, but we're not that far from the actual downtown, which ain't much. But and where we live, I try to describe it a little bit. Back then it was a few houses. You had to go up this big hill from the other road that came out from town. You go up this big hill, and our houses were like sort of on the sides and top of the hill, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But all around us, except for the part toward town, was a ridge, pretty high ridge. Well, actually, the whole town that has some ridges around it. But this is, you know, pretty high ridges all around, but that one side. And we lived at the end, at one street, dead end. And you go right down through a hollow there, and then you start up the ridge. But anyway, my mother, well, we actually had some friends that lived over the hill and down, went down and took a left. And there were only, I think, 2 houses on the right-hand side of the road. And our friend's house was up in the woods. It wasn't, I mean, like a mile in the woods, but it was up in the woods on the left side. And so that, and the rest of the little road, which was gravel then, went all the way down through more woods. And then you'd make either a left or right about a quarter of a mile down there, and there was one house if you went to the left, and then you went up the ridge, and the other way went toward town, you know, but it was heavily wooded. I mean, there was no houses except for that one little farm down there, besides what was right there with my mama. But anyway, she went over to visit, and she walked over, you know, it wasn't that far, and she walked over. And she stayed longer than she meant to, so she decided that my bird get home. It's dark, you know, and everything. So she comes down to the basement, comes out the basement, or starts out the basement door because it's easier just to cut through the woods there than it was to go out the front and go down this long driveway. And they only had the only light up there was the light on a pole out in front. It would shed a little light toward the back, you know, but not a whole lot. And she said that she opened the basement door and she saw something walking out of the woods on 2 feet, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And she said she was so surprised that she stood there like, you know, 15, 20 seconds just staring at it. And she said it was walking on 2 feet. It was very tall. She didn't know how tall, but it was very tall. And I said, at the time, it was a bear, Mom. She didn't know, you know, I've seen bears. I was raised in the country. She said it was not a bear. It was walking like a person. And she said suddenly she, you know, oh, wait. You know, she closed the door and locked it. And she went upstairs to tell the people that lived there, her friends, you know, there was something out there. Well, her friend's husband, he was real brave. He opened the window and looked out, you know, but he didn't go outside or anything and check it. He told her it's probably a bear, and she told him no. And then he suggested other things, and she said, no, it's nothing I've ever seen before. And so she decides to go back down to the basement. And she walks down to the basement, and it was a finished basement, you know, had rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And she walked into one of the rooms there on that side of the house where the woods were and everything. And, well, the woods were actually on 3 sides. No, actually 4 sides. And they had the driveway, and then the rest of it was woods and a little bit of yard. But she said she walked kind of over toward the window and said it bent down and looked in the window at her. And she said, that face, she said, I thought it might be a gorilla. She said, but it wasn't a gorilla. She said its face was strange. She said it made her think of a ram. Something about it did, you know, but she said not exactly, but it's what it made her think of, you know. It didn't, because it didn't look exactly like a gorilla, and she knew it wasn't a bear. It didn't look that way. And she said it looked in the window at her and took its fingers now, and raked down the window.
Oh, wow.
You know, like it was trying to see what was there, you know, on that window.
Mm-hmm.
And it raked down the window, and of course she got out of there real quick then. And she decided not to walk home. They brought her in, you know, in the car. And she told us, I was a teenager then, tells how old I am, but I was interested, you know. I thought, yeah, because we had heard, as kids, had heard about the Patty film, you know, about
sure.
out in Northern California. And
Mm-hmm.
we thought that's where anything was, out in Northern California. But, well, we talked a little bit about that. So I said, Mama, maybe it's one of them Bigfoot things. She said, I don't know what it was. She said, nothing I ever saw before. And so I go around to where the basement window was, and she told me that, looked in at her, and it had rained the night before, so there wasn't any footprints I could see,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but there were 3 finger marks down the window. You could see them because the window was a little dirty on the outside with mud.
Right.
They're kind of, it's a low, real low to, you know, pretty low to the ground, and, you know, it would get kind of dirty. So I was intrigued by it. I really was.
That would be something to be interested in for sure.
Yeah, I mean, she swore, you know, she said it was not a bear. It was not anything else that her friend's husband, he even said it might be a horse. She said, a horse does not walk like a human. So they might raise up on their hind legs, but they don't just walk up through the woods like that.
And it
But
don't
anyway,
have fingers.
she said it made a strange noise. She couldn't, she said it was more like a or something, you know.
Mm-hmm.
She said she really couldn't imitate it that well, but it was a And I'd heard them talk about the hoot, you know, the hoots
Right.
that some of them make, and that might been what she's trying to describe. She's dead now. She would be 100 years old. She's alive, a little over. And so I thought it might have been that she heard, you know.
Yeah.
And anyway, about 3 days later, I mean, the woods are all down around our houses. You know, they were down behind this house. There's still woods there, but there's some houses down in there now. But back in the 60s, there wasn't nothing. And she was out getting clothes off the line, and it was like dusk, you know.
Yeah.
And she heard that same sound again. And that scared her because it was right down behind our house down in the woods, you know. And so she just ran back in the house. And we talked about that and everything. And then I think it was about 2 weeks later, she was babysitting for two little girls that were friend of hers, little girls. They were like 5 and 6 years old, something like that. And me and my brother and my dad, I don't know where we were, I can't remember, but we weren't home. And she said that she heard something at the back of the house, around the back door, you know, round in there. She heard it kind of making just subtle noises around there.
Mm-hmm.
And she thought, oh, man, it's a prowler or something, you know.
I can
but
hear
she
you.
didn't know what to do because she had them little girls. And so finally she just jerked the front door open and ran to the neighbors and called the police. And they came and looked and nothing, you know. I said, Mama, you know what? It could have been that thing you heard. She said, don't tell me that. But that, you know, we never paid, you know, a lot of attention to sounds in the woods. Like we heard something howl, like we thought it was probably a coyote or something like that. Or, you know, maybe a bobcat, because there were some bobcats around. But anyway, that's the 60s thing. Like I said, it was about 1968, I think. If I remember, I was a teenager, and I think it was around 68 when that happened. But she never changed her story one iota about what she saw or anything.
Mm-hmm.
She was really, you know, and my mother didn't tell lies, you know. She wouldn't have just made that up, and, you know, she was not like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, okay, now I'll come to my, I don't know if you'd call it, I don't know how, encounter or what you would really call it. But me and some friends went up the road there, and you go up so far, and there's a place they call Hiwassee Knobs. And it goes over this little mountain, you know. It's higher than where we are or anything, and it's a little mountain. It's not just a hill. But when we went up there, it's like 1985, maybe.
Yeah.
Somewhere along there. And it was dark, you know, and we were just out riding around. And my boyfriend, he says, let's go up on the knobs. He said, I need to go use the bathroom anyway. So we go up there, and he pulls up the little, there was one thing up there, and that was a fire tower back pretty far up off the road, the main road that went through, which wasn't much of a road. But anyway, there were no houses, none up there. And until you got all the way over to the other town over there, there were a few houses right there. But anyway, so he was driving, you know, and I was in the front, and the others were in the back, and we pulled up there, and he pulled in, turned the car around, you know. He said, I'm going to go back here. And so I just opened my door and put my feet out on the ground, you know, was just sitting there because it was a little warm, you know. And I hear this, I mean, it was deep, deep breathing. It wasn't panting like an animal had run or, you know, heavy panting. It was just breathing, heavy breathing. I thought, what's wrong with him? I was thinking it was him for a minute, you know. I thought, what's wrong with him? And so he comes back around my side of the car and he says, put your feet back in the car real low and close the door. And then I got my hair stood on end, you know. I realized that wasn't him. And it was dark, you know, so we couldn't see it. But after I've heard some of these stories about how heady they heard, you know, well, we call them boogers. And it's what I always heard, getting house or the boogers will get you. But Sasquatch, you know, I heard they do that heavy breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I heard it for like a whole minute there. You know, it was just like it was taking these real deep breaths and then letting them out just as hard as it took them in, you know?
Right.
And, I mean, he jumped in the car and we flew down that hill back to the main road.
Wow.
But my hair was rising on the back of my neck. I was afraid to look back. You know, I was so scared I was afraid to look back. I probably wouldn't have seen anything because it was dark, but still I was afraid to look back.
Pretty close by to hear breathing.
And I didn't really think about Sasquatch at the time, but like a day or two later, I thought about it. I was like, oh my goodness, because up there, you know, there's deer and other animals, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think we have any bears as far down from the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
I've never known of any around here. But they're deer and, you know, the smaller game and stuff, so they would have food.
Sure.
But we didn't talk about it. None of us mentioned it. After we got down the road, we just went finished our ride and went home. And I don't know why we didn't even bring it up, but we didn't bring it up. We didn't say, what was that? Did you hear that? You know, or anything. And so I don't know if the people in the back seat heard it, but I don't see how they could have missed it because it was loud. It sounded like it was like maybe 5 feet away from us. Or,
oh, wow.
You know, because it was so loud. But
maybe everyone was just trying to block it out.
That was my real experience. I mean, like I said, didn't see anything, but I can't think of anything else it could have been.
Sure.
I thought about it. And here about 20 years ago, now this is not from my family. This is a family that lived on up that road I was talking about. We went up before we turned off onto the knobs. But it was, well, it's still a lot of woods. There's a lot of woods around here. I mean, for miles and miles around. And they were, he said they were children, you know, and they were out there in old fields, you know, just playing around and stuff. And he said all of a sudden they noticed this thing standing there watching them. It was right in the edge of the woods, you know, it was just standing there watching them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was standing up, you know, on 2 feet. And he said it was dark colored, it was covered in hair. And he said when it noticed them looking at it, that it got down on all fours and ran back into the woods.
It ran on all fours?
He said it got down on all fours and ran back in the woods after they saw it.
Oh, interesting,
But it was standing on 2 feet, you know, just looking at them.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I know what it was because I'd heard about Sasquatch, you know.
Oh, boy.
He's not older than, I mean, he's not as old as me. He's a younger man, but like I said, I don't know him real well, but he was serious about it. He was really serious. Now, he just told me that story, me and my granddaughter, about a couple of months ago. And he was really serious about it. He said that they were kind of afraid to go back out in the field after that, you know, for a long, long time. Cause he said it wasn't a bear. He said, you know, he could tell it wasn't a bear. He said it had.
Right.
It was very big. He said it was very big, and he said I don't know how tall, but he said it was taller than average man.
Mm-hmm.
He knew that much, and they had all covered in hair, and it was real dark brown or black. And he said that he didn't much care about going back in the field and him and his friends either, because that scared him.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But I don't know if this last one is anything or not. But my grandson, he's grown. I mean, he's like 22 now, right at 22. But he told me that they lived, him and his mom and them lived up there close to a dam, on a river, on the Tennessee River up here. And it's about 25 miles from where I live. And they had a lot of woods, around and then behind them, and back to their property had a lot of woods, and then there was more, they got off their property. He liked to go fishing, and he'd go out with his gun too, sometimes hunting things. But he said late one evening he thought he'd just walk out there and see if he seen any deer, or, he knew they were up there, and wild turkeys, he knew they were there, so he's going to go up there and just look around. He usually went with his stepbrother, but he went by himself that day, and he said he started walking up through there, and said he got to the edge of the woods, and he heard this real loud knock, something had hit a tree with a piece of wood or something. And he said it wasn't no little woodpecker knock,
Yeah.
He's raised in the country. He knows what woodpeckers, how they sound. He said it was just a knock. I said, well, what did you do? He said, I turned around and come home.
Good choice.
He said it scared him, because it was so loud.
Yeah.
It was just a loud knock. I said, well, Macklin? I said, it was just one knock? And he said, yes. I said, because it was just one of you. I said, I've heard that's the way they communicate and tell how many people's coming in the woods, or into their area, maybe one knock means one person, and if they knock twice, it's two people, something like that. Mm-hmm. He said, well, I went back up through there in the daytime, but I didn't go back when it got about dark anymore. I had to kind of laugh at him, because he don't really, he kind of rolls his eyes about Sasquatch, But he told me this on his own, so. And
very interesting.
One more little thing. This was another howl. This was late evening. I was walking up the hill, because, like I said, the hill goes up a little further. We're down on the lower, a little bit lower part. And I was walking up the hill. Me and the dog were walking up the hill, and there's over across that hollow, there's a field, a big, big, big field where the people raise cattle, and then the ridge is there, all the woods and stuff. Mm-hmm. And now there's some houses up there. I mean, it's not heavily populated, but there's some houses up in those woods. So I thought, nah, that wasn't what I heard, because I heard this strange howl. I thought, no, it had to be a coyote or something. It couldn't have been that, but all the cows that were in the field up toward the woods come flying down all the way to the other side, away from the woods, and kind of huddle there at the bottom of the field. Mm-hmm. And I thought, and my neighbor was sitting on the porch, and she said, what was that? I said, oh, you heard it too? And she said, yeah. She said, that was strange. I said, yeah, it kind of was.
Wow.
But I'm the only one in my family that truly believes they're out there. Besides, since my mama would have. I mean, if she was still alive, because she's seen it, so she really would. But
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, most of them just kind of roll their eyes at me and go on, like, yeah. But I got, since I've been retired, I had more time, and I looked at I watched your show on YouTube, and I'd watched, before I found it, I'd watched some of the Sasquatch Chronicles show, and it's where I heard you, and I thought, I just liked the way you asked questions, and you know what I mean.
Sure.
You weren't just acting all, I don't know, like people don't know what they're talking about or anything, because you'd seen them.
This is true.
Have you seen any more since those first 3 you saw?
I saw the 2 in 1974 and then 1 in 1988.
So you hadn't seen any more since then?
Not a direct sighting, no, but I've heard a lot of screams and other vocals and, found plenty of evidence.
Yeah, well, I had one more little thing. I kind of forgot. I hadn't forgot it, but it slipped my mind. I was in bed one morning, about daybreak, I guess. Well, I know it was. And when I woke up, just as I woke up, I heard this whoop. And I was like, wait a minute. I didn't hear that. And it sounded like it was close.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought maybe I was dreaming, maybe I wasn't good and awake or something. But I definitely heard it.
Yeah.
It was just a whoop. And it was fairly loud, but I could tell it wasn't too far away. You know what I mean? I could tell it wasn't too far away.
Sure.
Even though it wasn't just real loud. I don't know how I knew that, but I just knew it wasn't too far away. Like I said, there's still a lot of woods and stuff, and there's some houses out now.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I wonder if there's a family of them or a tribe of them or a troop, whatever you want to call it, maybe that go in and out of here. You know what I mean? Because on past that ridge, there's more woods, and they go for miles,
Mm-hmm.
And so there's plenty of hiding places.
Yeah.
And some of those woods have no houses at all in them.
Absolutely.
So
keep your eyes open. You never know what you're going to see.
Well, I really would like to see one, but not close.
Yeah, it's not something you want to see close. A lot of people want to see one, but they often get more than what they wish for.
Well, see, I realize if I was to come face to face with one, I'd probably, keel over. It wouldn't have to hurt me because I'd hurt myself,
Right.
I would like to, perfect sighting to me would be in the car on one of the little back roads out through there where there's lots and lots of woods.
Yep.
Just to see one beside the road or crossing the road, something like that.
That was
where
my
I could
second.
Get away pretty quick.
Yeah, that was my second sighting. It was the perfect one that everybody wants. I was driving along, and there it was across this, narrow river, and it took off into the brush. And I tell people, well, that's the sighting everybody wants. My first encounter is not the one you want, but that's the one that usually happens.
Oh, no. I remember, I've heard you tell about them. I probably would have just keeled over, if they'd wanted me, they had me for sure. 'Cause I would have been laying at their feet.
Yeah, you don't want to end
I
up
would
as a
have been laying at
sacrilege.
the first one's feet. I wouldn't even have to see the second one. You only had a 22 rifle or something with you?
I had a 22 rifle, yep, a single shot.
That's what I thought I remembered you saying, yeah. It wouldn't have probably put a dent in it, if you tried to shoot them. But evidently they weren't too aggressive, because when you fired that shot off, it looked like that would have really made them.
Yeah, I think it
go
kind
after you.
of. I think it kind of put them at bay. That's my guess. As they saw the rifle and heard it, and it was sort of a standoff. And then when that second one came around, well, the first one, stood there, and the second one came around after I shot. I figured, well, I better do what the dog did and took off running.
Yeah, sounds right. I don't know. I've probably been scared to run. I probably just, like I said, fell over and, rolled in a ball, like, where the mountains up there, Sitico Mountains, it's, like I said, most of it, after you get a little ways up, it's Cherokee National Forest.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a creek that runs through there, so it would be a perfect place up there for them to build. I mean, because it's woods, they got water and deer and,
Got everything they need.
I've got one relative that still lives there. He can live there, and he's actually in the park, in the edge there of the park, because his family was there before they made it a park.
Mm-hmm.
So he can stay until, when he dies, then it all goes back to the park.
Right.
And there's that creek right behind his house. And I've thought about going up and asking him, but I'm not a close relative. He's like a second cousin or something like that. And I feel kind of, I don't want everybody to think I'm nuts.
Well, it would be interesting to hear what he had to say, though.
Because he lives up there now. He's lived up there by himself for a pretty good long time.
Sure.
There's a cemetery right across the road. His church is up there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my dad is buried, because he wanted to go back to the mountains. And he was a member of that church when he was young and everything, so he was able to, And he came up to the cemetery when we were burying my dad, and, I did not think at the time, of course, at the time I was, sad about my dad, but he was 96 years old when he died, so, I was sad, but he couldn't hear anymore and he couldn't see. I mean, he didn't have Alzheimer's or anything. He knew you and all that, as soon as he could squint enough to see who you were. But that cousin, he came up there and talked, so he might be open to talking to me if I put it kind of delicately.
Sure, right. You ever hear anything strange up here? And
yeah, I've been trying to figure it out, because we go up there every once in a while, for put flowers and things like that, and it's just right across the road from where he lives. And I think that region up there is where you've heard of the guy, researcher from Tennessee, Scott Carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's part of his area there, because I've recognized some of the stuff from his videos, but I quit watching his because he's gone too far out there for me.
Yeah, he's a little odd, that one.
Interdimensional and cloaking and all that stuff,
Which is all nonsense,
I think they're an animal.
They are.
I think they're an animal. I don't know if they have any human DNA. They sound like they might have some, because they seem very intelligent. They have to be.
They're very intelligent, yes.
To be able to, But, people say, oh, something that big couldn't hide. I said, well, have you thought about some of these areas, how densely wooded and stuff they are?
Mm-hmm.
I said, I went in the woods before, and I know there are deer there, and I know there are bobcats.
But you usually don't see them.
I never saw them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
I mean, if I'd seen a deer, it came out of the woods, when I saw it. But when it was, in the woods, I never saw it. Now I'm I can't get out in the woods, anymore and tramp around. I'd love to. Of course, I think I would have somebody with me that was pretty well armed.
Right, absolutely.
My grandson, he likes guns. I mean, he don't have anything like a big AK-47 or anything like that, but he has guns. But he's not interested.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I could get out there, he wouldn't go with me. My oldest granddaughter, she's kind of interested, but she don't really want to go out in the woods. And I'm kind of with her on that. But we rode at the Citico, and I had her stop and just let us kind of look, and then at the cemetery, I kept my eye out. But I was always looking for a black one, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I found that they're not all black.
That's true.
Some of them are brownish red, and some of them are even gray.
Yep, I've seen a gray one myself.
Gray.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I told her one time that me and her friend need to go, and I'd watch out for the gray ones, because my eyesight's worse, and they'd stand out more.
Sure.
And she could handle the black ones, and her friend could handle the brown ones, you know, look for them. Because I realized, you know, they could be standing, 20 feet from us in the woods, and they don't move. You know, you'll just pass right over them. You're not going to see them.
Right,
unless they make some kind of noise or move.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, in my old age, it's got me really wanting to see just one time.
Mm-hmm.
Partly to prove to the rest of my family I'm not nuts, that I am not crazy. But when my mama told that, I truly believed then, Right. Before that, I thought, they're all out in California if there's any such thing,
Oh, no, they're all over the place.
Yeah, I realize that now. But back then, my mother, like I said, she did not tell stories that weren't true.
Right.
She just wasn't the kind of person that would do that. She had no reason to even say something about something like that unless it really happened to her.
Yeah, I think most of us know somebody that's just not going to make things up.
Yeah. She would bite her tongue before she'd tell, something untrue like that. She just wouldn't do it. Because she wouldn't have wanted to scare us.
Right.
Either. But so after that, I believed, but I didn't think about it much, and then later on, I thought more about it, and after that, up on the knobs, we heard, and hearing that guy talk about the one, because it was going the same way up there where he saw it, him and the other kids, It wasn't just him, some other kids saw it too. And so I started thinking more about it in the last, I guess, couple of years. I've started, and then I started listening to YouTube, different ones, and picked the ones I liked. Some of those videos they show, and they try to show me one, but I can't see it. I'll look and look, and then I'm like, where is it? I don't see anything.
There's lots of stuff like that, and if it's not clear to me, I dismiss it because, maybe they saw something, but, most people just aren't going to buy into it if they don't actually see it clearly on the film.
Yeah, and I know they're hard to film because, they're so reclusive, or how you want to call it, but they don't want people to know they're there and stuff.
I typically stay away from people as much as possible.
Yeah. But I know some of the younger ones seem to be a little more curious.
Oh, yeah, the juveniles are.
And I just wondered, she said the thing was big.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it was a juvenile, because she said it was really big, but she couldn't measure how tall it was,
Sure.
She just said it was really bigger than a man, much bigger than a man.
Right.
And it was dark. Like I said, there was a little light from that cooler light out there, security light, and she could see it.
Right.
And then, it was just after she got inside and went back down there and saw its face, looking in, that's when she really got scared. It really scared her. Said because it was not nothing I had ever seen before. This is because she said before she went back down there and it came to the window, she was thinking might have been a gorilla that got out or something,
Right.
Because she didn't get a good look at its face out there, in the dark. And then when she saw it in the window, she said, no, it wasn't a gorilla. She said she just could not think of anything that resembled that much, except said something about it made her think of a, male sheep, a ram.
Mm-hmm.
The big ones, with a real fierce look.
Yeah.
That's because they look fierce. And I was trying to imagine. I can't even think of what a ram looks like in my mind.
And I was just trying to think of that myself.
Yeah, I keep trying to picture one, and I've been thinking about getting on and searching out sheep and just see if I can. It would have to be a black sheep because from the way she talked, it was real dark colored. You know, she couldn't say it's dark brown or really black.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, that convinced me when she saw it. And then the things that happened later, sounds she heard again.
Sure.
Down in the woods, and then something at the back of the house. She said it was. They weren't beating on the house or anything like that, but you could hear them like they were moving along the wall and stuff in the back.
Mm-hmm.
There was a door there, so she was scared they'd ever what it was would break the door down and come on in.
Right.
She didn't go back there to, check it out or anything.
But yeah, probably a good plan to stay away from it.
Run out the door. But like I said, our neighborhood's built up, and there's more houses and everything. But they might not stay in this area, but it's possible they could still come down into these woods because that howl me and my neighbor heard was strange.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard coyotes, and it really did not sound like a coyote.
Yeah.
And I don't know about other animals like bobcats. Do they howl? They mainly scream like, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't a scream. It was just a long howl. And those cows took off. I mean, they come flying down there. And there's a whole herd of cows. I mean, 25 cows or something.
That usually makes a difference if something is chasing off a lot of animals.
Yeah, it was. They came thundering down. I could, see them coming because I got a pretty clear view of that field. There's a tree or two here and there between our house and the field, but you could still see, pretty well over there. My eyesight's still that good. But I got binoculars and tried to see if I could spot anything over there in the wood line, but I couldn't.
Well, it's a good idea to keep an eye on them,
Well, I know if I hear another whoop, I probably will be moving. Because, like I said, I can't be sure, if he was screaming, but I was awake. I know at the time I heard it.
Sure.
Maybe I was in that weird area between sleep and being awake or something.
Right.
But
Mm-hmm.
it was very, very plain. I mean, it was a whoop. And it sounded very close, but it wasn't just horribly loud.
Right.
It's just like somebody was standing outside my window and said it,
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that kind of made me nervous for a few days, but I still go outside once in a while. Now, I go out, I take my dog, I have to walk her because now we're in, they moved the city limits out, so she can't go out wandering around without me. And she's a pretty decent dog. She's German Shepherd. But I don't know what she'd do because we were walking one morning before daylight. This has been a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we walked down to that road where the friends live, but we didn't turn up that way. We went down, and there's houses down through there all the way down to the highway, And we were walking down through there, and there was this house there on the left. It's where some of my friends some years ago had lived, but it was a rental now. They rent it to everyone who has it now. And at the time, it was empty. No, nothing. We were walking, and my dog, she just stopped. and she stared at that house. Well, there's some woods and trees and stuff, not no real deep woods, but there's some trees and stuff kind of behind it, or, you know, there.
Mm-hmm.
And she just stared for like, I'd say, half a minute, you know. And all at once, her ears went, she laid her ears all the way back, and she started just yelping and hollering, and jerked the leash out of my hand and ran. I thought, well, what did she see? Because I was standing there looking, you know. There was no wind blowing trees or anything like that. And there was nobody there because it was empty and nothing stirring that I seen. But she ran, and it's a good little piece back to the house. She ran all the way home.
Mm-hmm.
I said, when I got home, I said, yeah, Molly, that's good. Every man for themselves, huh?
Well, dogs are a pretty good indicator of things that are around.
I've never seen her do that. Never. Lay her ears back like that and holler. You know, she just hollered, you know.
Wow.
Oh, you know, and up that hill and around the curve and gone. But
something scared her then.
Yeah, I told my husband, he was still alive then, I said, you know, I thought dogs were supposed to protect you, but she was like, all right, I'm gone. You can come if you want to. But he said, you know, he was here, and he said she'd come running up on the porch. And so then she looked back, and then she stood there, and she kind of whined, and she'd pace until I got back. And so something, I don't know what it could have been, scared her. I mean,
it's
there
unusual.
Was nothing that I could see. Nothing. And like I said, she's never done that again.
Right.
Of course, I really don't go walking before daylight anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I've decided that's not a good thing.
Yeah, it's probably not. Well, listen,
well,
June.
Like I said, there's still plenty of woods around, you know. And
right.
I think maybe we'll stick to daytime.
Well, we're running a little short of time. Very interesting information, and you'll have to keep me posted about anything that goes on there.
Oh, I will. You know, like I said, I'm wanting to see one, and if I see one, you'll be the first person I tell.
Awesome.
Because I am really, I do. But I don't want to see one close. I mean, not close.
Right.
Close enough to see what it really is, but that's it.
Well, I certainly appreciate
and hopefully I'm in the car.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, I appreciate you talking to me, and I really appreciate the information. It's very interesting.
Well, I didn't know the encounters and things I told would be very interesting or not, but they were, you know, mostly all family things. In the family, you know, it happened except for the one guy up on the road there. And I just thought, well, I hear some of the other stories, and they get run out of the woods and this and that, so I think maybe mine ain't that great of stories, but I know the ones that my mom and dad told were true. That it happened to them, and my aunt too.
That's very interesting.
But I really appreciate you calling me, because I didn't know if you would or not, because you know.
I'm always interested.
I knew you seem to be interested, and you take it more. Seem like some of them don't take it as seriously as they should.
Yeah, it's because I think a lot of people have never seen one, so they don't know. They don't know the gravity of the situation.
Well, the ones that claim to have experienced it, you know, seen one and stuff, they act like, oh, well, you know, just don't bother them. They won't hurt you. But I don't know about that.
No, that's not true at all.
Yeah. I mean, that just, I remember Teddy Roosevelt's story and stuff, you know, reading that. And, oh, well. But I'm glad you called me and let me tell. If you do put it on the air, and like I said, I hope people can understand my accent and stuff, because I've heard myself on recordings, and I think, do I sound like that?
They'll have no problem. Listen, June, thank you. I certainly appreciate it again. and keep
Well,
in touch.
I really appreciate you, calling me back and listening to me. It feels good to talk to somebody that don't roll their eyes at you,
Right, absolutely.
All right. You have a good rest of the day.
All right, you do the same, and thank you again.
Thank you, too. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.